time for another round of brandy. Candid conversations over cocktails about all things brand with your hosts, Reilly Newman and Scott Saunders, the brand developers behind Motif Brands.
And welcome back. Something very interesting I noticed in an ad campaign, and that is the classic brand Dawn, the dish soap, is using little ducklings in its ad. They're like CGI and they're talking and they have personalities and all of that. And I just thought it was really interesting because I've been noticing how even on their packaging, probably in the last year, they have had a little duckling on it.
Yeah, and it's not the first time the ducklings ever come into view of that brand.
No. If you know Dawn, they've ran ads since like 2002.
That's right. I keep thinking we're talking about a person. If you know Dawn like I know
if you know Dawn.
You know Dawn like I know Dawn.
Dawn would totally. No, so Dawn's been running ads since like 2002, which you've probably seen it where they're cleaning up oil spills, they're doing wildlife stuff, and apparently Dawn's really good at that. So if you ever fall into a vat of oil, it's like just get some Dawn and clean up. But they've always had this thing, and it shows the wildlife people like cleaning up the feathers, and they're using Dawn soap and all of that. And Dawn's always been a long time doing that, and they have all these relationships with wildlife organizations that goes back for like 45 years. Like it's a pretty big thing. It's been part of their brand. And so that's always from 2002, and it kind of came back around in 2010. They always had those ads running of the wildlife people helping these older ducks. I never saw ducklings. I think only recently in the last 5 years, they had one ad where like the hand was massaging a little duckling and getting the oil out. With not an oil massage. They were working it out. Here's
what you can't see, because we don't video our podcast. What you can't see is that Reilly was just like massaging with between his two fingers, like as if it was like he was like massaging a wing.
I talk with my hands. I'm a hand talker. So overall, I thought it was very interesting. And then once he introduced this little duckling to the Dawn soap, I was like, oh, that's clever. The yellow looks really good with their blue, coincidentally. And ducklings, sure, they definitely in their campaigns were showing adult ducks. I want to make that point, is that the adult duck was always the one that they were working on, the wildlife people working on. Sure, there's probably some ducklings, but that wasn't iconic. But anyways, they started working in the ducklings on their packaging, and then now they have these ads where they're using the ducklings as little mascots for the brand. Yeah. And it is brilliant because the association, I think, was already there from these decades of them going, hey, our Dawn soap works really well with wildlife.
Kind of agrees, but it's also gentle enough, like for a duckling, even though they didn't show that. It was an analogy they always used in the campaign earlier on.
Yeah, and so they've always had this relationship on the wildlife stuff, showing, hey, it's gentle, it's good for nature. It implies so many things just by them doing that, and it implies so many great things about the nature of the brand and how it treats wildlife and all that kind of stuff. But then on top of that, it shows, oh yeah, it's tough and powerful enough to work on industrial oil spills. It can handle the spaghetti stain on your plate,
Take on Chevron.
So I think it can take down Chevron. It can take down your grease. And I just thought it was pretty darn brilliant, and I was impressed. And I go, okay, that's interesting, because you think about it, if they would have done any other animal or some other brand doing this, you'd be like, wait, what are the ducklings? What do ducklings have to do with soap?
Washing your dirty dishes.
It's like, what's the connection?
Yeah.
And so it's
soap,
your dish soap. And so this is a perfect way that they used that brand equity that they've built over 45 years, and they're able to now leverage it into essentially a brand mascot.
Yeah.
Supports everything. Even if you go to their website right now, it's like the ducklings are front and center, and then only towards the bottom they talk about the wildlife stuff. And so it's actually really interesting as a brand kind of positioning around this. And it's like such a classic brand, and they're doing something so kind of kind of cutting edge with it. But we're not just talking about ducklings today. We are talking about what your brand could be costing you. And that's a weird question. It's a little bit of a biting question, because like we always say, and we say like in our book, is that you have a brand whether you like it or not. And so that brand is either working for you or it's working against you. So your brand could be potentially through neglection or just through improper kind of setting up of the brand. It could be actually costing you real money. And that can look in ways of leaving money on the table in negotiations, in sales and profitability, not appealing to the right audience, deterring audience, and not actually attracting the people that you want, or even getting the right talent. Is that there could be people who don't want to work for your company because the brand doesn't align with what you represent.
Yeah. And I think it's just the fact that if you ask most, business owners, they're going to say their brand is fine.
It's
they're
fine.
going to be,
It's fine.
and that's the problem is that they, when was the last time they actually did kind of a self-evaluation, an inventory, took a personal inventory, it's like of just personally assessing where they're at. I mean, we do this all the time as humans. We do it with goals, with dreams, with micro achievements. If there's projects around the house, and you're like, okay, what's the next one I'm going to do? And you just kind of, we're always assessing, and we do that with our personalities. We do that with relationships, you should do it with your brand.
Yeah, and so then that kind of brings it to the point where, okay, well, how do I do that? How do I, something that's as elusive and gray area as brand, how do I actually get that to a grade or a score or something to that degree where I can look at it and point and be like, okay, I'm in this ballpark, right?
Yeah.
We do that with IQs. We do that with personalities. There's plenty of those things. And so I've always had this kind of inkling of like, I would love to develop something like that. But the problem has always been whenever I see anything like that online, it reduces it down to what's your brand's personality or what's your brand's archetype or stuff like that. And it's like, oh, your brand's the rock star or your brand's the rebel. And it's like, it's all these kind of like, okay, that's helpful, but it's not. And
Yeah,
it's
especially when you're trying to assess what kind of deficit do you have going on with your brand, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's the gap between where you're at and where you're perceived, and that is where the cost, like you started off by saying, it's costing you money. Whether and that's where it really comes down to is that the idea of introducing what a brand deficit is, and that's kind of the goal of the evaluation, the self-evaluation, right?
Yeah.
Is to figure out where is that gap? How much gap is there?
Yeah, exactly. And we've talked about like kind of this gap before, this brand deficit, where in my conversations with founders, it's like I've heard where the founder knows, they have this gut feeling of like, it's not where I want it to be. And that could be, yes, business level performance wise, but also their brand is like their identity and their ownership is so tied up into this entity. And yet they feel this lacking. They feel like, it's just not perceived the way I want it to be perceived. Like we don't look like it's not as cool as I want it to be. We're just not perceived a certain way when I say, oh yeah, that's my company, or I work at this place, or whatever it could be. It's like there's this lacking. And so then I wanted to be able to kind of boil this down to not an equation or a template or anything like that, but be able to go, okay, what is that? It's more than just, oh, do you have good reviews on Google, or do you have good reviews on Facebook, or whatever it could be. It's like those things can be gamified, and I wanted to stay away from things like that. And so we've developed a scorecard for you all to try out. And it's the Brand Deficit Scorecard. It's a quick quiz that essentially kind of walks you through conversational questions to get to the root of what we're talking about.
Yeah. And we got a heavy emphasis that there's no, we are not mining for data. We're not doing anything. We don't ask for your email address. It starts off by asking your name and your business name, and that's only for the conversation's sake. You can lie through your teeth if you wanted. It doesn't matter what you put down because only you are going to see the results of this score. We don't. It's nothing like that. But it's an exercise for you an online exercise through this questionnaire to kind of land and figure out where you're at.
Yeah, and I'm very excited about it just because the questions highlight some areas of things that you can't really equate to like a number, right? They're conversational in the sense of, hey, when people do talk about your brand, how accurate are they normally when describing kind of either your offering or how special you are in the market or kind of your unique stance, right? And it's things like that as a founder or maybe someone part of a company that you go, oh yeah, I work at company Y. You'll get that feedback, and so you can recall those things just like in conversation and be able to go, okay, yeah, it's about like this, or sometimes they do, or sometimes they don't, or actually, yeah, every single time people know exactly what we do and what we represent. And so being able to feed off these 15 questions that walk you through nice and easy. It's like 4 or 5 minutes.
Like it takes like what, a couple minutes to take?
Yeah.
Right.
And you can take it multiple times. You can retake it. And again, it's kind of crazy because we're not gathering any information. It's a horrible business decision, but it's fun.
Well, no, but I'll be honest with you. It's for the same reason, like we do this every week. and we don't get any monetary gain from this podcast show. We're not running ads. We just do it because we love doing it. We love talking about it. And this is another way that we like. To us, it feels like the more chance you can educate the general public, the more chance for us as an agency to get educated clients.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so, but there's no obligation that there's this totally free and zero, like you're not putting anything in. You just it'll generate your score. It'll generate some feedback for you and be done. You could retake it or whatever. Or there's an option to reach out if you want to start a conversation with us about it, specifically for your business, and maybe a possible, collaboration with us.
Well, and here's the cool thing is that after you go through the 15 questions, your score is right there.
There is no hidden tricks. We're not pulling anything. It's free and anonymous. And if you feel like you want to take a chance and see where your brand lands, make use of this form. And the link is going to be in the description for this podcast.
Yeah. And so you go there and it's going to walk you through the 15 questions, nice and conversational. You can take as much time as you want. Then you get your score instantly right there. And then it actually breaks it down for you into 5 different domains or like dimensions of how I kind of set up these questions. They're different kind of phases. And so then you'll see, okay, how'd you score based off of those different kind of regions? And then here's the kicker is that if you, again, none of this information is being gathered, you can opt in to then type in your revenue and your margin. And based off of some mathematical equations, I kind of had these different questions equate to different value counts. And then also based off of each question has 4 possible answers. They have different variability in the weight of their answer. So the thing is that after you go through this, you'll see what it's costing you and be able to go, okay, that's how much money my company is potentially losing based off of what I'm leaving on the table, based off of, yes, I'm creating this much value and your margin accounted for, then how much are you not capturing of that value? Because that's what brand's going to really help unlock is that capturing of value. And that could be even just, targeting the more relevant audience or being able to have more pricing power as a brand or whatever it could be for yours.
And that closes the gap.
Exactly. And so those 5 dimensions make up the different kind of sets of questions that make up the 15 questions. And the first one is called identity drift. And that's essentially where you have like a disconnect, whether that's internally or externally, where there's identity in the sense of, yes, how you're outwardly seen, but also inwardly. And I think that's important because you can, over time, especially with some of these companies, if it's like, oh, you've been around for 5-7 years, you start to have this disconnect of, time just, it erodes, right? These things just start to slip and it erodes over time. And so what you think, like how you think you look, might not be how you look on the outside. And that happens to us as people where you go, oh yeah, I used to be like a skater. And then now you're kind of old and you're not as cool when you're on a skateboard and you're just at a different season of life. And we wrote actually in Brandy, there's a chapter about this, about, you can't read your own label. And so when you're inside the jar, you know what you are, you know what your identity is, but on the outside, there can be a drift of what that identity truly is.
Yeah. And what the label looks like, what you're signaling to the potential customers.
Yeah.
So that's one area, right?
That's one of the 5.
It's one area. I mean, you say dimensions, but it's more like areas, like spheres. Just think of it as like little aspects, right, of brand. And then I think another one gets into like the consistency gap.
Right. So then consistency is that just comes down to cohesion, consistency going, okay, are your messaging, one of the questions, like your messaging across the board, are you consistent in your messaging? Or does it kind of feel like, well, our voice on, let's say, Instagram sounds kind of different than the way we write our emails or the way we do our advertising. Or
your website looks different in how it's approached in design and consistency of look and typeface treatment, everything else with what you send out in e-blasts or, again, how you carry out your social media. And it's kind of like everybody, whoever's in charge of it kind of does their own thing and you get it done. But if it's lacking that consistency, and we've talked about that's one of our core, the 3 C's of brand, successful brands, right? It's consistency, clarity, and creativity. Like are you doing it in a creative way, distinctive way? So, but yeah, that having that consistency is paramount.
Yeah, and really keeping in mind, like we said on the previous episode, is that consistency is different than repetition. It's not about being repetitive and going, okay, well, that just means we have to say the same thing every single place. It's like, no, that actually is not the right way. You should be, depending on the medium, you should be adjusting what you're saying and adjusting to the context. The third of the 5 kind of areas that these cover is positioning blur. And, we're sticklers for positioning because that's core to strategy. And so when that positioning starts to get a little loosey-goosey and you don't really stick to your guns in areas, whether that is in your negotiations, in your sales, or how you're pricing products, or just the position in the market and the stance you're taking, that this is why you are unique as a brand and what makes you unique and where you bring that value. Because if you think about it, if you're not holding that position, then that value is going to devalue over time. Like you're going to lose that value. You're losing that edge, which makes you be able to charge either a premium or charge what you're truly worth and what you're bringing to the market.
Right, because it's about your clarity. And when you start losing clarity in the market space, that allows other competitors to do very similar things to you to then kind of start to emerge in and take over your spotlight. Think of it that way. And so that's where you maintain that clarity in the market space of what is your distinctiveness. And if you don't have anything distinctive, then yeah, you do have a problem. And that goes back to your business model, the way you do business, the way you deliver product or service to the customer, anything that can be slightly different than what other people do in a good way, and a way that is bound in strategy, not just random. Because we've seen brands that just want to be different, and it's all over the place to the point then now they are inconsistent. And we just talked about why you need to be consistent. So that's another approach too, is that it's being distinctive in a strategic way that is supported and consistently carried out throughout your brand.
And then that kind of blends into the 4th of the 5 areas, and that's really the perception misalignment. Relating to the first one of the external kind of identity, but to me, this is more of the perceived value of how the audience is not visually seeing you, right? In their mind's eye, how they see you. What is that perceived, not only what you mean to them, but the associations, the perceived value, the actual like subjective value that they see in you. And so I think that becomes very important, just because it's going, okay, just because you're saying certain things and you're acting a certain way and you're trying to be a good company and a good brand, it doesn't necessarily mean that the audience is perceiving that value that you're putting forward, because the perception is ultimately in the hands of the viewer. And
and if anything, think of it this way: perception, when it's underachieved, when it's undermet, that impact of that negativity is pretty big. But when you overstate, when it's, like I've always had a surprise when there's I encounter a brand that just it doesn't look like it's a good choice, but the product or service was amazing. And oh my gosh, my first thought is they're signaling out to me that they're just mediocre when they're really good. And that's where, that's a deficit, but it works in their favor. But when it's the other way around, when you're all talk, you've got, you have a snazzy looking logo and some sharp looking business cards, and you think you got it made, and then you're signaling, and then it's poor service, it's mediocre product, whatever it is, that's a bigger deficit and harder and has a different impact.
Yeah.
So
the other one's almost like a surplus. That's almost a good thing, but then it's also like a surplus can actually start to hurt you because you're not taking full advantage of that.
Right, because how many more people would you be having at the door if you not only signaling you're awesome, but you're delivering awesome.
Yeah, it's always like those little local restaurants that are like that, where you find like a diamond in the rough where their food's amazing, but then there's the brand and interior is awful, and you're like, okay, I love the food here, but not anything other than that. But
yeah.
The 5th and final is leadership disconnect. And this is a big one, just because if the leadership isn't rowing in the same direction as kind of where the brand is going or aspiring, or the leader, you get a new CEO or you get a new leader at the helm, and they have this grand vision and they're going, all right, this is it, right? And it looks good, it sounds good, but then there's no alignment with the actual brand, or there's almost just this disconnect from reality, then you're not going to move very much and you're not going to move the needle.
Well, no, what's going to end up happening is the thing of it is like if you have a car and you're like, okay, it's going to go and this is where we need to go. It's an autopilot. It's locked in. And then whoever's, driving or owns the car, they're behind the wheel and they're grabbing the wheel every now and they're trying to jerk it, let's say the left or the right, and the car's zipping off and it's jerking back in, or it gets off track. It's not going to go where it intended to go because leadership's steering another way that for whatever reason is, it shouldn't be going.
Yeah. And I think that's even more important now because you are getting, especially with the emergence with AI, you're going to get smaller companies, less managerial oversight, less of this department, and then the CEO's up in the ivory tower making commands. The best leaders like Alexander the Great, he led from the front lines, and leaders who are actually in the trenches and they're part of the game that's happening. They're not just shouting orders and barking at people. It's like those are always the best ones who prove most effective and actually get the most done. So it's like keeping that in mind and going, okay, if my brand is having these issues of these 5 areas, it's like you're going to have this gap happening and it's going to slide. And actually get out your bingo card because I have an Apple example of I always have to mention Apple, but this happened when Steve Jobs left and John Soley took over Apple. It was a complete derailment of the Steve Jobs kind of like
model,
right? And you got someone who came in, I think he came from Pepsi at the time, or then he went to Pepsi, but he was from that managerial kind of Peter Drucker world of the managerial capitalistic American lifestyle. And Steve Jobs was almost the opposite of that. I think Steve Jobs closed his first gig for Apple barefoot, just to give you a hint of how anti-capitalism he was. But he, Steve Jobs gets kicked out, and then Apple starts getting led by this guy, and it just starts to derail, and they start doing things that are just so like what PC was doing, and so anti-Steve Jobs' vision that then the company just really started to tank. And so then they had to go back and bring back Steve Jobs, and then Steve Jobs made a bunch of money with Pixar and a bunch of stuff. So anyways, the cool thing about this is that putting so much thought and kind of energy into this quiz, you could call it, and it's concise, it's to the point, it's conversational, and I just hope that it brings a lot of value to you and your business. Yeah. And the link is in the description, so you can easily go there, share it with someone, and pass it around.
There's no reason to not. I mean, even if you just you're curious to see what this thing does. Again, there's no hitches, there's no anything hidden on our end, no secret agenda on our end or anything. So just it's like a little fun tool. But we hope you do this just for your own sake. Find out where you're at.
Yeah. And if you have an inkling of that feeling of going, my brand's just not where I want it to be, I really want to be here, or you have that aspiration, trust that gut feeling. Your gut is usually right, and that is actually probably costing you real money and opportunity costs on top of that. So anyways, thank you for listening. We will put the link right in the show notes in the description, so you have it right there. And actually, let us know what you think, too. You can email us or just contact us some other way. You can DM us on Instagram or something. Heck, you could send us a letter. You could do that if you want.
You could, yeah.
Or by duckling. You could, homing duckling.
Yeah.
All right. Until next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.